Why Washington fears a Burkina-Mali-Niger gold alliance. There are moments in geopolitics when silence carries more danger than confrontation, and when a single proposal exposes the intentions of entire empires. In early 2024, Burkina Faso found itself at the center of such a moment, not because of war, not because of instability, but because of something far more valuable: gold. Strategic gold. Monetary gold. The gold that shifts currencies and rearranges global influence. When a polished U.S. diplomatic message arrived in Ouagadougou requesting a confidential technical consultation, the surface seemed harmless. But beneath that diplomatic courtesy was a demand so audacious that even seasoned African analysts were stunned. Washington wanted full visibility into Burkina Faso's gold operations, access to real-time extraction data, production flows, export timing, pricing mechanisms, and internal digital systems. The U.S. called it cooperation. Traore called it what it was: control wrapped in paper. Tonight, we uncover what the United States truly wanted and why Traore refused to kneel. Dear friends, the story begins long before a diplomatic cable reached Ouagadougou. It starts with a shift in Washington. A shift subtle on the surface, but earth-shaking in its long-term implications. The U.S. Treasury had just relaxed restrictions on strategic minerals. Gold markets trembled. Mining corporations in Texas, Colorado, and Nevada began preparing for new overseas ventures. And analysts inside the State Department quietly drew a red circle around one place: Burkina Faso, a nation with abundant gold, a sovereign digital system, and a leader who had already demonstrated he would rather break a system than submit to it. To Washington, that combination was dangerous. The request for a private meeting came politely, but every word was heavy with unspoken meaning. No press, no official agenda, no witnesses. This was not diplomacy. It was a test, and it revealed the real objective long before negotiations even began. The United States did not want a partnership. The United States wanted a foothold. The deeper analysts in Burkina Faso reviewed the first batch of American proposals, the more alarming the patterns became. What looked like harmless technical clauses were, in fact, deeply intrusive. One clause allowed American auditors to enter extraction sites during unpredictable production periods. Another granted temporary operational control if export delays occurred. But the most dangerous clause of all was buried in the monitoring and transparency section: the demand for real-time data synchronization between U.S. servers and Burkina Faso's sovereign mining database. It was not about gold, it was about predictive power. Because in geopolitics, whoever sees the future first controls it. If America could monitor Burkina Faso's gold in real time, they could anticipate revenue flows, track fiscal stability, predict export decisions, and preempt any negotiation before it even began. That kind of visibility does not create partnership. It creates dependency. But the Americans were strategic. They never raised their voice. They never threatened. Instead, they spoke the language of modernization, efficiency, investment, and stability. They sold dreams of modern mines and upgraded infrastructure, dreams wrapped in the fine print of digital surveillance. Inside Ouagadougou, the atmosphere grew tense. Ministers, economists, and security officials debated late into the night, splitting into two camps. One group argued that accepting parts of the proposal could bring investment. The other group, those closest to Traoré, recognized the blueprint immediately. This wasn't aid, it wasn't partnership. It was the quiet beginning of neocolonial management. At the same time, subtle pressure began to appear outside the negotiation room. A European development loan was mysteriously postponed. A Western think tank published a report labeling Burkina Faso's mining sector opaque and concerning. An international newspaper ran an editorial warning that resource nationalism in the Sahel threatens global mineral stability. None of these events were officially connected, yet all of them were pointed in the same direction: pressure without fingerprints. Inside the presidency, Traoré gathered his team. When they laid out all the signals, economic, diplomatic, and media-driven, he asked a single question: if we give them our gold today, what will they ask for tomorrow? No one answered. They didn't have to, because everyone in that room understood the truth. Access to data becomes access to decisions. Access to decisions becomes influence. Influence becomes control. And once your future is predicted by someone else, your sovereignty exists only on paper. The turning point came during the confidential meeting with the American envoy. The US presented polished charts, 5-year projections, and a transparent partnership model. Then came the real request, a demand for seamless integration of US top monitoring tools into Burkina Faso's sovereign data grid, the same system designed explicitly to prevent foreign surveillance. The room went silent. Traore's advisors exchanged glances. The Americans kept talking. They didn't realize the decision had already been made. Within 48 hours, Burkina Faso activated a counter-strategy. Not a speech, not a protest, but a quiet act of resistance. A nationwide audit of mining permits, a freeze on new foreign mining contracts, reinforced protection of the sovereign data system, and a tightening of gold export protocols. The Americans responded immediately. A Western financial institution issued a warning about investment risks. A US senator accused Burkina Faso of aligning with non-democratic partners. A business lobby called for safeguarding global supply chains. But the most significant reaction didn't come from Washington. It came from Bamako, then Niamey, then Conakry. The messages were calm but historic. We are watching. You are not alone. Pressure on you becomes pressure on all of us. A quiet Sahelian alignment began forming, what analysts would later call the birth pulse of AES 2.0. America had come for Burkina Faso's gold, but they had awakened something far more threatening. African unity built on sovereignty, not fear. And that unity changed everything. From that moment onward, the United States was no longer negotiating with a single country. They were negotiating with a region that controlled nearly 20% of the world's newly mined gold, a region that no longer asked for permission, a region that was suddenly aware of its collective power. In the end, Traoré refused the deal. No modifications, no concessions, no polite middle ground. He rejected the entire structure, not because of ideology, not because of anti-Western emotion, but because he understood the deeper game. The Americans did not want gold. They wanted the architecture of African sovereignty. And Traoré shut the door. Throughout this confrontation, the world saw only fragments, rumors of a deal, whispers of tension, and small diplomatic signals floating across headlines. But behind those fragments was a full geopolitical contest over the future of African sovereignty. Traoré did not merely refuse a contract. He refused a model in which data becomes leverage, leverage becomes dependency, and dependency becomes the invisible hand guiding a nation's decisions. Burkina Faso chose something different, self-determination, even at a cost. And in doing so, the country triggered a wider awakening. Mali, Niger, Guinea, each understood that what happened in Ouagadougou was not a local dispute. It was a rehearsal for the next chapter of Africa's resource struggle. The Americans wanted to follow Burkina Faso's gold. Traoré's answer was simple. If you want to follow our gold, follow our direction. A sentence that may mark the beginning of a new African century. Burkina Faso chose something different, self-determination, even at a cost. And in doing so, the country triggered a wider awakening. Mali, Niger, Guinea, each understood that what happened in Ouagadougou was not a local dispute. It was a rehearsal for the next chapter of Africa's resource struggle. The Americans wanted to follow Burkina Faso's gold. Traoré's answer was simple. If you want to follow our gold, follow our direction. A sentence that may mark the beginning of a new African century.